Every knife has a purpose, and the purpose of today's knife I've never talked about before. So let's freaking do it.
Give me some space, it's about to go down. Cover your ears, it's about to...
Hello, I'm Jeff, and I do and review really cool stuff, so subscribe before you take off. The knife today is a knife that I just wasn't sure I was going to buy. I'll be honest. It was a knife that I looked at, I thought was really cool, but a few reasons, and we'll talk about them, why I wasn't going to do it. But I ended up doing it, and I'm glad I did. And that knife is the Meatcrafter. What a sweet looking little blade, huh? It's a knife that Benchmade made in conjunction with Steve Rinella. If you're not familiar with Steve, he is the owner of MeatEaters. He has a Netflix special on that. He also, his company owns First Light, which is a hunting apparel company. Really neat guy, really interesting guy. If you're into hunting, he really has some great stuff to talk about. You should look him up. He wanted to develop a knife. He said that there's so many knives out there when you're out hunting that you can process the animal out in the field, then bring it in. But he said there's a gap between processing the animal in the field and actually getting it packaged up before you cook it. There's lots of cooking knives, lots of field knives, but the knives in between of cutting up your animal, making sure you put it in the right things along those nature. He wanted to create a knife for that gap. And I think there is a gap there. And I think he made a good knife around it. So let's talk about, before I talk about my review of this and some stuff I've done with it, let's talk about the specifics of the knife first. When your adventures afield transition to the kitchen, the right cutting tool will make all the difference. Designed in collaboration with MeatEater Steven Rinella, the new Meatcrafter is a hybrid hunting fixed blade featuring the Benchmade SelectEdge 14-degree edge angle that provides a fine, smooth edge to trim, debone, and slice your preferred cuts of meat. This is new to Benchmade. The CPM S45 VM Premium stainless steel provides the perfect balance of a fine grain, sharp edge with carefully engineered blade flex. This knife makes just as much sense in the back of your truck as it does in the kitchen drawer. Just ask Steve. So all that's true. It really, really is. And what a sweet blade. This knife, if you look at it, it's kind of a mixture between a boning knife and a fillet knife, which is interesting. The thing that popped out to me is just how thin this thing is. Let me see if I can keep that focused for you. You can see it is a really thin blade. It's so thin that the camera won't even focus on it, but the handle is nice and relatively thin. It feels really comfortable in the hand, but that knife is fillet style thin. The steel, I'll be honest, I'm not super familiar with. It is a newer steel, as Benchmade said, for them, but it is supposed to be a high grade stainless, which is great for using if you want to out in the field or wherever else. My gap for me for a knife was what I would call a barbecue knife. I need something that when I'm barbecuing, I can cut stuff up and I don't have to use a full-size chef knife. I'm also looking for something similar to what Steve's talking about here, is if I get an animal and I need to process it, I can process it. If I want to prep a beef brisket, this is a great knife for that. And I actually have some B-roll of me processing one I've done here for Father's Day, a beef brisket. Side note here, I went in to get a beef brisket and I picked one out. I got home and I realized that I bought a full bottom round roast, which, when they're in the full packaging, they look relatively similar. So that was a dense moment. My beef brisket for Father's Day turned into a round roast, but side note there. As you can see from this video I shot of me prepping that roast, it is a really smooth cutting knife. It's obviously super sharp. Benchmade, all of their knives come out incredibly sharp. I don't know if I buy into the whole 14-degree edge angle, whatever. I'm sure that that's fine. And, maybe they have done testing on that. It sure is sharp. I'll give them that much. And whether it's 14, 20, 25, 35-degree angle, having a sharp knife is incredibly important. The things that stood out for me with this is that it felt more like a fillet knife, but stronger. So the blade does bend a little bit if you need it to, but it's more rigid than a fillet knife. So if you've ever cut up a fish before with a fillet knife, it can be really floppy, which is very useful when you're cutting up a fish. But this one gives you a little bit more traction, a little bit more strength in the blade, because you're going to be cutting some bigger cuts of meat, some thicker stuff, and maybe you want some straighter cuts there. The sheath, let me show you the sheath real quick. It's kind of a Kydex sheath. They call it a Bolteron, but they say it's pretty much the same thing as Kydex, and it is. It feels a little bit more kind of a mixture between leather and Kydex. So it's kind of a neat actual compound, whatever it is. My issue with this sheath is there is no attachment of any sort on this. You can obviously buy one that has the loopholes. My idea for this is to put it on my belt to, again, barbecue with, or processing on a table. So I kind of want this on me. It's not a huge thing, but for the price, which we'll talk about in a minute, it's kind of a bummer that there wasn't something more slick there. The handle material is a G10. I love G10. It looks freaking rad. Look at that white on the back. It's almost like it's ivory back there with the G10 mixed together. My hands, again, if you've watched my videos, I have a large hand. It fits me perfectly. There's actually room. If you had an extra large hand, you'd probably be fine. Doesn't feel any hot spots. I used it for 45 minutes and there was no hot spots. It's just well designed. It's smooth to the touch, but it does have a little bit of grippiness to it. In typical G10 style, I think it would be fine if it gets wet. I got a little bit of beef juice on there. I didn't have any issues. I'm sure that at some level it'll get slick, but it's definitely a good high quality handle material. So overall, this thing's 11 inches. Blade is just over 6. The handle's just under 5. So a good length. A 6-inch blade is definitely one that you're going to have a lot of cutting surface, which you're going to need if you're cutting up big chunks of meat. I do love, there's only a few types of blade designs that I really love. This is one, which is that fillet style. They call it a trailing point. I call it like an Asian style. You see a lot of designs from Asian blades that have that swooping belly and that coming to a point. I think it's just a really cool design. It really, really is. And I think for the purpose that you're going to use this for, whether you need to poke into something or you need to sweep to cut, it's going to be perfect. And obviously that's why they chose the style. So let's talk about the one big negative to this. And it's the reason why I said in the beginning that I almost didn't buy it and I wasn't going to buy it. This knife, Soup and Nuts, made from Benchmade, is $300. Yeah, I mean, that is a lot of money for a blade. Now, when you're buying anything from Benchmade, as we know from the past, Benchmade putting their name on it is automatically a 20% premium, it seems like. Sorry, Benchmade, but that just seems like how the pricing is. That said, people buy the knives, and they're good quality knives. You can't knock them for that. If people keep buying them, they'll charge the price. A knife like this that is made in conjunction with a Steve Rinella. You have to have a cut for him because he's going to be promoting it on all his influencer channels. That's why you're going to pay a little bit more of a premium. This knife at $150, I think would have sold like you wouldn't believe. You could even put a little bit lower grade steel on it and it would have been fine. That said, if this is a forever knife for you and you love it, you want that high-end stuff. I absolutely fell in love with it. I bought it. I cringed when I pressed buy now. I got it in the mail. I pulled it out and I was like, if I don't love this thing, it's going back. And I pulled it out and I fell in love with it. This is going to be, for me, a heavy use knife daily. It really, really is. Now, can you stomach $300 for a knife? That's your budget and that's your decision. But it's a hard decision because it's a lot of money. There's a lot of knives out there, even fillet knives that you could get that would be 80% of this and probably a third of the price. And they're good knives. That's a decision you would have to make. Part of me buying this one is to support Steve a little bit. He is a Montana boy. Not originally from Montana. I think he's from Michigan originally, but he's born or raised here in Montana. MeatEaters is an awesome show. He does a lot for conservation. Supporting him was important for me, so that's really what pushed me over the edge. He's got a cool little logo and his signature right there, if you can see that. Good dude. If you haven't seen his stuff, look him up. So would I recommend buying this knife? If you're like me and you've been searching for that perfect barbecue knife, that perfect processing a big roast, processing an animal for that matter, cutting it up, packaging it up. If you've been looking for that knife and that's been missing from your kit and you have some stuff, but you're like, it's just not perfect, I would highly recommend this knife. Man, look at that thing. That is freaking sweet. Again, part of buying a knife, especially a expensive one like this, is just how freaking cool is it? And if there's a cooler blade out there than that, please comment below with what it is, because that thing is freaking sweet. It is just something else. It's a work of art. It really is. Meatcrafter is its name. And it is a art crafter is what it is for me. It's just something else. It's light. It weighs 4.5 ounces. It's just, it checks all the boxes except for price. You really have to swallow to buy this knife. It's just, it is what it is. So this is a special edition. I'm making this in June 2020. I don't know how long this knife will be out. If you love it and you want it, you better get on Benchmade's site and buy it. Otherwise, it could be gone in 6 months or a year. Just hard to tell. A lot of these knives will cycle through once the initial sales go through. That's all I got today. Subscribe before you take off. Thanks so much for watching till the end, and until next time.